the echo of red heels. The air in St. Augustine's boarding school was always heavy with the scent of old wood and damp stone, a relic of its colonial past. Tucked deep in the Nigerian countryside, far from the bustle of Lagos, the school was a sprawling compound of weathered buildings surrounded by dense, whispering forests. The students, mostly teenagers from wealthy families, were sent here to be molded into disciplined scholars. But the whispers among them were not of academic rigor. They spoke of her Madame Koi, the ghost of a teacher long dead, whose crimson heels clicked through the halls at night, a sound that chilled the blood of anyone who heard it. The legend was old, older than the students, older even than the teachers. Madame Koi, they said, had been a strict disciplinarian in life, her sharp tongue and sharper gaze keeping students in line. She was known for her signature red high heels, polished to a mirror shine, which announced her presence with a rhythmic koi as she patrolled the dormitories. But her life ended in tragedy. Some said she was murdered by rebellious students, others that she took her own life after a scandal. Whatever the truth, her spirit never left. At night, when the moon hung low and the wind howled through the forest, her heels echoed in the empty corridors, searching for those who broke the rules. On 2024, the legend had faded into a tired ghost story, one told to scare new students during midnight gatherings. But for Amara, a 16-year-old scholarship student who had arrived at St. Augustine's just a month ago, the story felt different. She didn't believe in ghosts, not really, but there was something about the school that set her nerves on edge. The way the shadows seemed to shift in the corners of her vision, the way the wind carried whispers that sounded almost human. And then there were the dreams, vivid, suffocating dreams of a woman in a flowing white dress, her face obscured, her red heels clicking on a floor that seemed to stretch into infinity. Amara shared a dormitory with 3 other girls. Kioma, the bold and brash leader of their little group. Nkechi, quiet and superstitious, always clutching a rosary. And Ife, who laughed off the ghost stories but never walked the halls alone at night. The 4 of them had bonded quickly, their differences smoothed over by the shared isolation of boarding school life. But as the weeks passed, Amara began to notice things that the others dismissed. The faint koi sound in the distance when she stayed up late studying. The way her desk chair would shift slightly when she returned to her room, as if someone had sat in it. And the cold, always the cold, seeping into her bones, even on the warmest nights. One evening, as the girls gathered in their dorm after lights out, Kioma suggested a game. "Let's summon Madame Koi," she said, her eyes glinting with mischief. "It's just a story, right? Let's prove it." Nkechi clutched her rosary tighter. "That's not funny, Kioma. You don't play with spirits." "Oh, come on," Kioma scoffed. "It's just a bit of fun. We'll do it in the old staff room, the one they don't use anymore. Everyone says that's where she died." Ife hesitated but nodded, caught up in Kioma's enthusiasm. Amara, though, felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "I don't think we should," she said quietly. "There's something wrong about this place." Kioma rolled her eyes. "Don't be such a baby, Amara. It's just a ghost story. You in or not." Against her better judgment, Amara agreed. The 4 girls crept through the darkened halls, their footsteps muffled on the worn linoleum. The old staff room was at the far end of the main building, a place students were forbidden to enter. The door was heavy, its paint peeling, and it creaked ominously as Kioma pushed it open. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust and the faint smell of mildew. A single window let in slivers of moonlight, illuminating a cluttered room filled with old desks, broken chairs, and stacks of yellowed papers. Kioma lit a candle she'd smuggled from the dining hall and placed it on the floor. "Okay," she whispered, her voice suddenly less confident. "The story says you have to call her name 3 times and knock on something wooden. Then she come." And Nkechi's hands trembled as she clutched her rosary. "This is a bad idea," she murmured, but no one listened. Kioma took a deep breath and began. "Madame Koi," she said, her voice echoing in the silent room. She knocked on a desk. "Madame Koi." Another knock. "Madame Koi." A final knock, louder than the others. For a moment, nothing happened. The girls stood in a tense circle, their breaths shallow, the candle flame flickering. Then, from somewhere deep in the building, came a sound of faint, unmistakable koi. Ife laughed nervously. "That's just the wind, right?" But Amara's heart was pounding. The sound wasn't coming from outside. It was inside, somewhere down the hall, growing louder, closer. Koi koi, koi koi. The rhythm was deliberate, unhurried, like the steps of someone who knew exactly where they were going. "We need to leave," Amara whispered, her voice shaking. Now Kioma, for once, didn't argue. The girls scrambled toward the door, but as they reached it, the candle went out, plunging the room into darkness. Nkechi screamed, and Amara felt a cold hand brush against her arm, though no one was close enough to touch her. The koi koi sound stopped abruptly, replaced by a heavy silence that pressed against their ears. Then the door slammed shut. Ify yanked at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. "It's stuck," she cried, her voice rising in panic. From the darkness came a whisper, low and melodic, almost like a lullaby. "You called me," it said, the words curling around them like smoke. "Now you must stay." Amara's knees buckled, but she forced herself to stay upright. "Who's there?" she demanded, her voice trembling but defiant. "Show yourself." The air grew colder, so cold it burned her skin. And then, in the faint moonlight, she saw her. A woman stood in the corner of the room, her white dress glowing faintly, her face hidden in shadow. Her red heels gleamed like fresh blood, and as she took a step forward, the koi koi sound filled the room, sharp and relentless. And Nkechi was sobbing now, her rosary forgotten on the floor. Kioma was frozen, her usual bravado gone. Ify was still tugging at the door, her breaths coming in gasps. But Amara couldn't look away from the figure. There was something familiar about her, something that tugged at the edges of her memory, though she couldn't place it. "What do you want?" Amara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman's head tilted, as if considering the question. When she spoke again, her voice was like a blade, cold and precise. "Justice," she said. "You broke the rules. You must be punished." The room seemed to shift, the walls bending inward, the shadows twisting into shapes that weren't quite human. Amara's vision blurred, and she felt a pull, like gravity shifting beneath her feet. The last thing she heard before the darkness swallowed her was the relentless koi koi of those red heels. When Amara woke, she was alone. The staff room was gone, replaced by a long, endless corridor lined with identical wooden doors. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth, and the only light came from flickering bulbs overhead, casting jagged shadows on the walls. Her friends were nowhere to be seen. She stood, her legs unsteady, and called out Kioma Nkechi. "Ify," her voice echoed, unanswered, swallowed by the oppressive silence. And then she heard it again, koi koi. It was distant but unmistakable. Coming from somewhere deeper in the corridor, Amara's first instinct was to run, but there was nowhere to go. The corridor stretched endlessly in both directions, and the doors offered no clues. She picked one, at random, and pushed it open, stepping into a classroom that looked eerily like the ones at St. Augustine's, but wrong. The desks were overturned, the blackboard covered in frantic, illegible scrolls, and on the teacher's desk sat a pair of red high heels, pristine and gleaming, as if waiting for their owner. She backed out of the room, her heart racing, and tried another door. This one opened into a dormitory, but the beds were empty, the sheets stained with something dark and sticky. The koi koi sound was closer now, and Amara could feel the cold creeping up her spine, as if the air itself was watching her. The next door led to a library, its shelves towering to an impossible height, filled with books that whispered as she passed. She reached for one, but when she opened it, the pages were blank, except for a single phrase repeated over and over. "You broke the rules." Amara slammed the book shut and ran, her footsteps echoing in the unnatural silence. The koi koi followed her, always just out of sight, always just behind her. She tried door after door, each revealing a new nightmare: a classroom where the walls bled, a dining hall where plates were piled with writhing insects, a chapel where the stained glass windows showed scenes of torment instead of salvation. Finally, she found a door that was different. It was heavy, made of dark wood, and carved with intricate patterns that seemed to shift when she looked at them. The koi koi was so close now, she could feel the vibrations in the floor. With no other choice, she pushed the door open and stepped. Inside, the room was vast, a cavernous space with no walls or ceiling, only an endless void. In the center stood the woman in the white dress, her red heels glowing like embers. Her face was still hidden, but Amara could feel her gaze, heavy and unyielding. "You called me," the woman said, her voice echoing from every direction. "You wanted to see." "I didn't know," Amara stammered. "We were just playing. Please, let me go." The woman stepped closer, her heels clicking with every step. "There is no going back," she said. "Not for you, not for them. Where are my friends?" Amara demanded, her fear giving way to desperation. The woman tilted her head again, and for the first time, Amara saw her face, or what should have been a face. It was a void, a swirling blackness that seemed to pull at her soul. "They are with me," the woman said. "As you will be," Amara screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the void. The woman raised a hand, and the room dissolved into darkness. When Amara opened her eyes, she was back in the staff room, but it was different. The walls were covered in scratches, deep and jagged, as if made by desperate hands. The candle was burning again, but its flame was blue, casting an eerie glow. Kioma and Kechi and Ify were there, but they weren't themselves. Their eyes were empty, their movements jerky, like puppets on strings. They turned to Amara, their mouths moving in unison. "You broke the rules," they said, their voices not their own. Amara backed away, but the door was gone. The koi-koi sound filled the room, louder than ever, and the woman appeared again, her red heels gleaming. "Join us," she said, her voice a siren's call. "Stay forever." Amara's mind raced, searching for a way out. She remembered in Kechi's rosary, the stories of faith overcoming evil. She didn't believe, not really, but she was desperate. She grabbed the rosary from the floor and held it up, shouting, "Leave us alone." The woman laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Faith cannot save you," she said. "Not here, not now." But the rosary grew warm in Amara's hand, and, for a moment, the woman hesitated. It was enough. Amara lunged forward, pushing past her friends, and ran toward the window. She didn't care that it was locked, or that they were on the second floor. She threw herself against it, and the glass shattered. The night air rushing in. She fell, expecting pain, expecting death. But when she opened her eyes, she was lying on the grass outside the school, the stars bright above her. The koi-koi was gone, replaced by the distant hum of crickets. Her friends were nowhere to be seen. Amara stumbled back to the dormitory, her body aching, her mind reeling. The other students were asleep, oblivious to what had happened. She tried to tell them, tried to warn them, but no one believed her. The staff room was locked, the window intact, as if nothing had happened. Days turned into weeks, and Amara began to doubt her own memories. Had it been a dream, a hallucination? But then she found it a single red high heel, tucked under her bed, its surface impossibly clean, and at night, when the school was silent, she could still hear it. Faint but unmistakable. Koi-koi. She never saw Kioma and Kechi or Ify again. Their parents were told they'd run away, but Amara knew better. They were still there, trapped in that endless corridor, their voices joining the whispers of the damned. And Madame Koi-koi was waiting, her heels clicking, her void-like face watching, ready for the next student who dared to break the rules. The years passed, and Amara left St. Augustine's, but the memories never faded. She tried to move on, to build a life far from the school, but the koi-koi followed her. It was in the creak of floorboards, the tap of rain on windows, the rhythm of her own heartbeat. She saw the woman in her dreams, her red heels gleaming, her voice promising justice. One night, decades later, Amara returned to the school. It was abandoned now, the buildings crumbling, the forest reclaiming the land. She stood in the old staff room, now just a shell of its former self, and called out, "Madame Koi-koi." The air grew cold, and the koi-koi echoed once more. The woman appeared, unchanged, her heels as bright as ever. "You came back," she said, her voice a mix of surprise and satisfaction. "I want to know why," Amara said, her voice steady. Despite the fear, "Why us? Why them?" The woman's void face seemed to smile. "Because you called me," she said. "Because you always call me." And then Amara understood. Madame Koi-koi wasn't just a ghost. She was a curse, born of fear and guilt, fed by the stories told in hushed tones. Every whisper, every dare, every midnight ritual gave her power. She was the punishment for curiosity, for defiance, for breaking the rules. Amara turned to leave, but the door was gone. The koi-koi grew louder, and the shadows closed in. She didn't scream this time. She didn't run. She closed her eyes and let the darkness take her, the sound of red heels echoing into eternity.